Welcome to EDRD 605 and a look at CBAs. So we are going to analyze the CBAs from Adrian Peterson, who was kind enough to record some data for us. So about this time through the program, you're wondering there has to be something other than the QRI that I can use in order to obtain instructional reading levels. Mainly the reason is because you're looking at the amount of time that it's taken you to do 3 different QRIs with 3 students, and you're probably somewhere in the range of 2 to 3 to even with a high school student about 5 hours of time spent just completing the QRI and thinking about how is that possible in a school setting. If you remember back to EDRD 601, we talked about curriculum-based assessments. We talked about them again in 602 as a whole class piece. One way of figuring out an instructional reading level is to look at an actual curriculum-based assessment similar to using the QRI. So what we have done is we've actually taken, in the passages you listened to with Adrian Peterson, our complete QRI passages that we made a teacher version that has words down the side. So at the end of the first sentence there's 14 words, so you always know at the end of the sentence how many words are there, and I can either start the sentence above or the sentence after, depending on how I want to add numbers to the students or to the scores. And we kept working down, so there is a whole set of passages all from the QRI that are for narrative. I believe we went 1st through 8th grade. Or 1st through upper middle school, and then we did expository from 5th grade up through, I believe, 11th grade. So the whole purpose of this is to simplify what you've been doing now, and if I have all the data I need on a student, that it doesn't have to take me 2 to 3 hours anymore to adjust a reading level or to really get a snapshot in time about where a student is at. So the whole procedure here is supposed to take a very short amount of time to help you find an instructional reading level. I will say there are a couple of things to keep in mind, that if I'm using a CBA instead of the QRI, I am going to have fewer pieces of information about the types of errors the student makes. I will have fewer information about how they read over a large portion of time. So you really have to know what you're looking for at this point in time. The second thing is that I will not have any comprehension information on the student at this point. So if I haven't done a complete QRI to use this, it is just giving me a way of leveling a book for the student, but it still may not be appropriate in terms of comprehension. For an elementary student who we're developing comprehension in a classroom, or with read-alouds, we may be able to use this more effectively without comprehension. For middle school and high school, we may need to use something like a closed passage and or do some sort of just a listening comprehension passage that would take less time with the student to determine that comprehension level. But at least this gives us a place to start in terms of books to use in order to increase the student's fluency or to practice any sort of repeated reading. So let's begin by talking about how Adrian Peterson did with the CBA piece. So we started with the Johnny Appleseed story. Adrian told you he was a 4th grader, so this is the passage that we had chosen. At first we had a different passage and it wasn't working the way we had hoped it would, so we resubstituted the Johnny Appleseed passage in, and we're just taking a 1-minute snapshot of the student's reading. So initially when Adrian started reading, he was starting to audibly decode the word Chapman. He did get the words, so I did not count that as an error. His first mistake comes down in the sentence with crops. He inserts the word on. So I'm just adding it in for you. His next error came at the beginning of the next sentence. He started to visibly decode or audibly decode the word, especially, and you're going to hear an X put in there, and then he ends up not finishing the word, and I provide it for him. So this in and of itself is just one error because it is only one word. The very next word, he ended up saying instead of the word looked or liked, he ended up inserting the word looked, and then he repeated it and said the word liked. So the initial error would count as a mistake, and the repetition would not be an error. So up through this point in time, I'm going to highlight all of them. We have 3 errors. keep going on the sentence, the next part where he gets to, he ends up coming in here and inserting the word handing instead of the word heading, but then he also does repeat the word heading and says it correctly, so he is making the changes necessary. And those were all I had for errors at this point in time. He ends the story with the word apple, so I'm just going to put a dash in there so we know exactly where to look to begin. So in this case, and my lines are shifting because of adding words, there are, or it is 68 words at the end of the sentence. There should be 6 words left here on your story. So we know 68 minus 6 is 62, so we're going to go to our narrative cover sheet. So this is all you would really need for a student, is this cover sheet. The idea behind the cover sheet is I'm going to put all my information on here, and that can save me paper in the long run. I would put all my stories into a sleeve so that I knew exactly what it was. I just use a dry erase marker to save paper. So at this 4th grade level, we know he ended up reading 62 words. Oops, let's go ahead and find it. Okay, so I want to find 4th grade, and I need to add in 62. I know his errors are 4, so I have to scroll down. So 4 errors, so we know then that he ended up reading 58 words correct in that 1 minute's time. I'm going to pop up my calculator here and do 58 divided by 62. It's going to give me 93.5%. So I'm going to just round that up to 94. Oops. Let's get that in the right spot. It should accept it. There we go. So at grade level, according to his accuracy, he is at an instructional level. I would absolutely never put Adrian Peterson at this level for reading material. When you're reading 58 words a minute at a 4th grade level, I'm going to pop up the norm chart here. For a 4th grader, this is the spring of the year because it is March. 58 words a minute is going to be less than the 10th percentile, and that is absolutely not a place where we want this student to be working at. It will definitely be frustrated and will not get the improvements that we want to see. So we need to establish where he would be at. 58 words per minute is going to be similar to a 1st grader in the spring of the year. So we need to keep going backwards and see how far we can get. So that's why you see the 4 passages that he's read. So we're going to pop down Johnny Appleseed. Passage number 3 is going to be the friend. In this instant, we're just going to start going through the words. Very first thing was the word was incorrect. I'm just going to highlight it. He inserted the word, or he replaced it with the word were. He read the next line all right. He comes down and was struggling with the word dolphins. He was trying to read it and then just couldn't, so we ended up providing the word for him. Just a little ways down the line, he ended up replacing the word leaped with landed, and then he repeated it and corrected it, so the initial error will count, but the repetition will not. In the next sentence, you're going to see that he added the word here loved, so I'm just going to make a mark here. Hopefully it'll let me. I'm just going to make a mark at the beginning of the C. So he said Mark loved, and then he repeated to correct and then said could. And then when you get into the word almost, he ends up saying that correct or incorrectly twice, as well as the word predict. Keeping going, you're going to see his next error is not till down here where he ends up saying the word is playing instead of the word play, and then he repeats and says it's okay. Then the last sentence would be, or he ends after the word decided. So in this instance, you're going to see that I need to figure out where I was at on this line. So I know 78 words were at the end of the line. I'm going to end up counting back 7. So he finished with 71 total words and 6 mistakes. So I'm going to put in my 71 words. I'm going to add in my 6 errors. And that's going to give me a grand total of 65. Pop up my calculator again. 65 divided by 71. Going to be 91.5. So again, I'm going to give him a 92 and round it up. So again, he's at an instructional level for accuracy because this is a 4th grader. Still in that instructional range. But again, 65 words per minute when we look at the norm sheet is not going to be an adequate number. So at this point in time, he's somewhere between the 10th and the 25th percentile. Still not where we want him to be at this point in time. So we really need to go back another level and see how that looks. So that is why he read the 2nd grade passage. So I'm going to pop up the 2nd grade passage. And it's about the family's trip. Now you're going to visibly notice or audibly notice that there is a little bit of an increase in speed on this one, and you can see the accuracy will go up. So let's begin. The first mistake that I have is for the word lived. He ended up saying the word loved first, repeated it and corrected it, so the repetition's okay, but the initial error is still counted. In the next row, some of you may have selected excited. He actually started to audibly decode it and did get it correct, so there is no mistake there. The next mistake is actually he says the word plan and then ends up repeating and saying the word planning. So in this case, he had stopped. It looked like he was moving on and then re-said the word, noticing that there was more on the ending, so I did count this as a mistake. In the next line, you're going to see there was some audible decoding. He starts saying alas and then figures out that it's Atlanta. I did not count that as an error in this situation. When you get towards the end here, he says Atlanta. He has a repetition in here of the word Atlanta. And that was the last mistake in this selection. He ends up finishing after the word book. So if I count back from 83, I have 3 words, so I know that he read 80. So if I go to my grid, I'm going to pop in 80. I know he made 3 errors. So there are going to be 77 words correct. I'm going to pop up my calculator again. 77 divided by 80. Going to give me 96.25. This time I'm going to drop it to 96 in this instance. Still in the instructional range, no matter if it was 96 or 97, with 77 words per minute correct. Now for a 2nd grader, that's getting a little closer to where we want to be of the 89, so it's somewhere between the 25th and the 50th, just because there's still a drop off on where I would really like to see. If you're looking at Ames Web and newer norms, by the end of 2nd grade, they really are at approximately 100 words per minute. So these norms are getting them to be a little dated, but they haven't done an improvement since then. So it still provides us a baseline at this point in time, but they are really a little low in terms of what you're seeing in terms of other norms that are coming out at this point. So we're still not at this 50th percentile, which is where I would really like him to be. So we know that we have to do some sort of a different passage or another passage. So we're going to drop down the windows for 2nd grade and pop up the 1st grade version. So the surprise is 1.8. You're going to notice right away in the surprise that he had trouble with the title, but that really doesn't play a major factor in how he did on the rest of the story. So in terms of errors on this one, when you're looking at it, his first mistake comes in this sentence where instead of most he says almost, and then he adds in the word he. So I'm just going to circle of at this point in time. He repeats, makes an error on the word almost. I'm not going to count that as a penalty again. And he corrects and does use the word of. So right now I'm just at 2 errors on this case. When you continue to go on, some people may say that he said want. When you really look back, he did say the word went. So that's not an error. His next error doesn't come until he comes into the word the. He actually says the word And the next error is he says any instead of enough money. So he was fitting in or substituting a word that made sense for him. That is the last error in this selection. He finishes right after the word just. 102 words in that line. In this case, because he's so close to the previous line, I'm going to count 91, and then he has 1, 2, so I know he started at 93 words and had 4 mistakes. So in this case, I'm going to pop in 93, and here are my 4 errors. And then I'm going to add in my 89. In terms of accuracy, we'll figure that out quick. So 89 divided by 93. We're going to end up giving him a 96 again. So when you're looking at these scores, I'm just going to put in his name. Put in the date for yesterday, March 21st. Okay, so when I'm looking at these pieces, this is a great example for you to look at. Here's a student that we will probably never get an independent level accuracy for. So we know that he's definitely at a low reading level. We've seen this instructional level accuracy across 4 levels now, and we need to determine then where to begin. So I'm going to bring this norm chart back up and put it on the side to compare. So we talked about second grade 77 is too low. In this instance, here's first grade, he's at 89. In terms of a first grader, he would be above the 75th percentile. So this kind of gives us a problem at this point in time. So we know the story for the surprise is a 1.8. So it's a higher level first grade passage. So we are going to want to start somewhere between that and the second grade passage, which was a 2.3. Because he is still only instructional and at a low level for second grade. So we would want to end up placing Adrian, in this case, at a second grade level. So we're going to start right at a 2.0 for an instructional level. I'm just going to write this in. So even though his instructional level right here is going to be a range from first all the way to 4th grade, and maybe even beyond 4th grade, it's going to be something that we want to change. So in this case, for his true instructional grade level, I'm just going to pop in 1, but it is truly anywhere between 1st and 4th grade. So this is where you really need to use the norms to find out how the student would actually be benefited with a selection. Now, if you're looking at the amount of time it took, it's 5 minutes of audio, and that is the entire process I used to administer 4 CBAs. In this case, Adrian did not really need to do 4. If I know I have a struggling reader, most of the time I'm going to skip the grade level passage, and it's going to get me down to somewhere in about 3 minutes and 30-second range. Because I know just from experience with Adrian that there's no way he was going to be at this 4th grade level. For an entire classroom, if I'm going to do this 1 student at a time, even if I'm a 4th grade teacher, to really think that it took me about 5 minutes per student, that is a realistic possibility for me in the classroom. And I just want to make sure that I have passages. Some of my students are going to need to go into the 5th and 6th grade range, maybe possibly even 7th. It's not uncommon. I've had kindergarten students go as high as 6th grade with still being in an independent or instructional level in terms of oral reading fluency for accuracy and words per minute correct, but their comprehension's nowhere near that. So you have to be prepared to go down and up with your student selections. And a good place to start most of the time for an entire classroom is at grade level, and I can go down, I can go up if I need to with the students, but this is going to be one of your easiest ways to simplify time and still come up with a correct set of assessments that will give you an instructional level. Just make sure in this case, the one thing, you're trying to do it quickly, you don't want to lose out on accuracy. A student that makes a lot of errors, you still may need to tape record. especially until you are more familiar with the passages or you've administered a number of passages, just so you're hearing things a little more clearly. Otherwise, you may be misrepresenting a score here or there along the way. In this case, Adrian was pretty easy to listen to. Plus or minus one word's not really going to affect a whole lot of things as you're seeing in his scores, so you don't need to be as careful. But again, in that 1 minute, you're not getting a full spectrum of what his skills are. You will start to see trends over time as you test more kids with the CBA, that you'll be able to identify a student who is dysphonetic versus a student who is dysorthographic. And you're going to see some of these fluency drops. The importance of the CBA, especially if I want to do this in a timely manner and get pieces ready for a student or automatically identify an instructional reading level, I have to start learning the norm chart. So where is a breaking point for this 50th percentile is where I would really like to see it. There's a consistency here in terms of his scores, but you really want to see where the breakdown occurred. 77 is more a mid-year score for a second grader. So we could even put Adrian in this case at a 2.5 level possibly, because it is somewhere where he would be a little more apt to be okay, because at the 2.3 he is at more of a winter range. So we could even change this to a 2.5 level if we wanted to, just to make sure that he was at an appropriate setting. So you may try a 2.0, it may end up being too easy, and you may have to go to 2.5 a little more quickly. Depending on the situation you have with your student, you may end up starting at a 2.0 just to build some confidence, and then increase to a 2.5 once they're meeting the targets of the point in time that you would like them to be at. So it is a little bit challenging at first to get used to this idea, but it's a lot different than your traditional screening assessment like Ames, Webb, or Dibbles. The whole purpose of this is to identify an instructional reading level. So it's set up with a 1 minute passage to identify an instructional reading level for fluency and accuracy, versus Ames Webb is a screening based on a grade level in order to identify a student that's below grade level or at least at grade level in terms of a norm list. So their purpose is to identify a student that may be low. The purpose of using this type of a CBA is to actually identify an instructional reading level in a much quicker time than the QRI. So we hope you understand how you could use this. These will be posted, since they are just a QRI passage, in your 604 folder, hopefully in your 605 folder, as well as they should be on the K-12 Reading Program Blackboard site, so you'll have access to these pieces. Again, 1st through 7th grade for the narrative is what we chose. If you're going above 7th grade, we actually decided to focus on expository. So you're going to see we started with the 5th grade passage and leveled out some of the upper middle school and high school passages so that we have passages at each level from 5th through 11th grade. So if you have any questions, you can ask your instructors, or please feel free to email us and ask if you have any questions. If you come across any passages that you don't think are leveled correctly, or they're resulting in some mixed up data, it does happen, especially with CBAs. You're going to see, and that's why we switched out the Tommy DePaula article for 4th grade with the Johnny Appleseed, is we were having some higher scores on 5th grade passages than we were on 4th, and so a good sequential progression ended up being to move in the Johnny Appleseed article. So please don't hesitate to ask questions, and we hope you understand using the CBA and determining an instructional reading level in a more timely manner. Thank you.